Thank you. Representative Tokuda.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I do appreciate the delegate from Guam bringing up proper maps, as sometimes Hawaii finds itself in the wrong position many times. But I want to elaborate just slightly on that particular thread that you mentioned. Talking about understanding our history, historical facts, historical cultural context as well. When we look at Guam, for example, in a few days, we will celebrate the liberation of Guam on the 21st from the occupation of Japan. Is it important that as we train our servicemen and women, our soldiers, to look at the Indo-Pacific and the first island chain right there, that they do understand that Guam at one point, yes, is a territory now, but was occupied by Japan during World War II, and that there still exists even to this day some cultural, social tensions that may exist between the two countries or those of those ethnic origins?
Ma'am, it's a strategic imperative that everybody in our Navy, everybody in our military services understand where all of our territories are, and then geographically where they stand, especially out in the Western Pacific in the first and second island chains, to be sure that we know where the possible future fight might be. It is an imperative.
Absolutely. And so, even when we take a look at this whole complex issue of diversity, equity, inclusion, when we really understand the historical context and understanding that needs to be trained and educated upon our servicemen and women, call it critical race theory, call it whatever you might want, there are a lot of situations where it would behoove us not to, educate those individuals in our academies about things like the occupation of Guam, things like the illegal overthrow of Hawaii by the United States, which is a very sensitive subject in my home state, and one where we often find a rub between the military and our local indigenous community as well. So many other issuances in which cultural competency, strategic empathy would be a great military strength for us now. So, when we take a look at our recruitment efforts, when it comes to making us the most effective fighting machine here in the world, should we not be looking for individuals that have a natural, immediate strategic empathy towards the theater in which we are finding ourselves engaged?
Yes, ma'am. Cultural competency is a big improvement at our United States Naval Academy since I graduated in the early 80s. Now that it's so important for the United States military forces to fight alongside our partners and our allies, cultural competency is critical to building trust early on in a young military person, whether they're enlisted or officer of any of the services. So that's a huge improvement in our Naval Academy with our International Programs Office, what we teach in our history classes, what we teach in our political science classes, to have an appreciation of the past history of those that are our partners and our allies and fellow citizens.
Absolutely, and more importantly too, sometimes, as I was going on a codel with a number of folks on this panel here, understanding how people think on the ground, not just in the United States, but throughout the theater that we're engaging in. That is so important to have. That being said, what we do know, and I know the data is very dated, I think when I took a look at the Workplace Equity Opportunity Survey, 2017 might have been the most recent data that we were able to find, and there's some other surveys, again, somewhat dated, not fully inclusive of the pandemic era right now, but even then, 42% of service members of color turned down assignments or permanent change of station because of fear of discrimination or racism in where they might be assigned to. We have seen a significant increase in anti-Asian hate in our community. Even prior to the pandemic, 1 in 4 Asian American service members reported racial or ethnic harassment or discrimination. 57% of active duty family respondents have been subject to racist comments or jokes. I know that is not the responsibility of our service academies, but you train the men and the women who will become members of our active duty military. And so we have to nip this in the bud. How are we making sure that we create a safe environment for our communities of color to be able to recognize that they not only have a role, they have a strategically important role to play in the defense of our country?
Ma'am, with regards to ensuring that our leaders of character have the cultural competencies, but I think it's not just of the force that they're leading, it's also the cultural awareness, and that we look to our allies and other nations to form a joint and combined force that in order to deter, and specifically as you discussed through the Pacific, it's a national strategic imperative. And I think it's important that as we continue to develop the leaders of character, they have that cultural awareness and understanding regardless of level of leadership in order to employ it.
Thank you very
Representative
much.
Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get started, I'd like to request unanimous